Welcome to the Storytelling That Sticks for Business and Life podcast. I'm your keynote, TED Talk and story coach, Doug Stevenson. In this podcast series, I'm going to share with you some simple and practical storytelling techniques and hacks that'll make you stand out from the competition so that you can get paid to speak, or to give a TED Talk that goes viral, or to simply tell your story in a way that makes a difference in the world. You'll learn how to choose, craft, and deliver stories that stick. Personal stories from your amazing life, business stories, leadership and sales stories, stories that are marketable and memorable, stories that sell you and your product or service. My job as your virtual keynote and story coach is to help you design and deliver stories and speeches that get people to do what you want them to do, or to consider a new perspective. If you're serious about using storytelling to advance your career, to get paid to speak, or simply to get your message across in a more engaging and compelling manner, this podcast is for you. All right, well, let's get started. John Register, welcome to Storytelling That Sticks for Business and Life, the podcast. How are you today?
Doug, I'm doing fantastic. It is so great to see you, to hear your voice. Wow, it's been a long time.
It's been a long time. We've had a long-term relationship. We worked together many, many, many years ago. But where I want to start with this interview with you, because you've had quite a fascinating life, and where you are now is very different than where I think you had a vision for your life early on in your life. So first of all, just tell me, what was your vision for your life when you were younger? Where did you think your life was going to go?
That's a great question. I thought I was going to be a 20-year lifer in the United States Army. I had been boarded for officer candidate school. I loved the military life. I was Operation Desert Shield Desert Storm Gulf War veteran, but I also was an athlete, and I was a part of the Army's World Class Athlete Program, and I was on my way to the Olympic trials for 1996 Olympic Games to see if I could make that. And USA Track and Field News had picked me as the one to watch in the 400-meter hurdles. So yeah, life was going to be gravy.
Wow, 400-meter hurdles. You had your life laid out for you. Army, you were going to be an officer. You were in Desert Storm. You were working on your athleticism. You were always an athlete. Am I correct?
Yes, I'm kind of eclectic because I was an athlete, started with some sports of baseball, hockey, I did some track and field, football, but I also was in choir and I played cello. And my first instrument was piano, and I played some guitar. So I had this interesting group of friends when I was growing up that were kind of artsy as well as athletic. So I was in this kind of quagmire of of individuals. It was really pretty unique.
So you had a lot of opportunities and a lot of directions you could have chosen to go in, but something happened along the way. Tell us about that event that changed everything when you were preparing for the Olympics.
Yes, I was training for the 1996 Olympic trials in the hurdles, 400-meter hurdles, which is one time around the track over 10 obstacles spaced 35 meters apart. And the wind was blowing very hard in Hays, Kansas. The All Army team had just pulled in. We're doing our shakeout, and I was having trouble with my steps. I can lead with either leg; it doesn't really matter. I can lead with my left leg or right leg over the hurdle. But sometimes in hurdles in life, you just want things to stay the same. And I was trying to get my right leg to lead, and it just wasn't working. So I did my one last proverbial pass, and as I came on the blocks, my right leg led over the first hurdle. I was on. The second hurdle came into view. I was on there too. Right leg led. When I got to the third hurdle, I felt the Kansas wind really push against me, but I pushed back against that wind. And I realized I was going to have to take that hurdle with my left leg. So I jumped off the right leg, went across the hurdle with my left leg. I landed, and my leg hit the ground, my foot hit the ground, my knee hyperextended, and then it dislocated and severed the artery behind the kneecap, the popliteal artery. And 7 days later, after having this life of going to officer candidate school, having this life of being a world-class athlete, uh, I was faced with an amputation. Either keep my leg, use a walker or a wheelchair for the rest of my life, or amputate the leg and use a prosthesis for the rest of my life. And that was a catalytic moment that shifted and changed everything. One wrong step.
One wrong step. Now, that is what I would call a crucible story, a severe incident, a severe crisis, a life-changing event that caused you to have to look at your life very differently and reconsider your options going forward. Now, when we met many, many, many years ago in the Story Theater retreat in Colorado Springs, you came in with that story. Now, the question is, had you been asked to give speeches based on your story, and how did that evolve out of this incident where you got injured, you had your leg amputated, and all of a sudden you're trying to move forward? You were still in the Army. Tell us how that all evolved. How did you move from that event forward in life, and all of a sudden now you're coming to me in the Story Theater retreat to work on the story?
That's a big question. Got lots of things going on in my head with that. Uh, Here's how that happened. I was sharing bits and pieces and versions of the Crucible story, but I often wouldn't share it from myself. I would have other people, thoughts, ideas, videos that would share the story, and I would kind of skirt around it. And I did it so fast that people were not, they needed a breath, they needed a pause. And what happened? So I would say it generally like this. So I was a world-class athlete, had an accident, I went over a hurdle, I dislocated my knee. 7 days later, I was an amputee. And then I went on to win a Paralympic silver medal. And then I would go on, right? So they're like, wait a minute, what? What happened? What's going on here?
What?
Oh no, go. So I was at a National Speakers Association meeting in Denver, Colorado, Denver chapter. Bernice Armoire Flygirl was speaking, and she was talking about she was sharing a story of how this she was trained by the military, the Marines, to fly these attack helicopter as a pilot. She was a pilot, and how that she spent the Army or the Marines spent so much money to get her to fly these attack helicopters, these Cobras, and she was unwilling to spend $500 for her speaking career, the coach. So that convicted me. And that conviction was, I cannot do this on my own. I can't pull this story. I don't have it. And so I walked out in the hallway that afternoon and I called you and Deborah to get that last seat in the class. And it was the best investment that I've ever made um, in this business because you all were able to pull from me to own this crucible story as I'd never had before. So, and it's gone so deep. It's incredible. And that's the moment. That was for me, the catalytic moment in my life and the shift from just kind of just dabbling and stuff to really building a business that releases others from their pain.
Now, before you came to me, you were obviously speaking. Were you getting paid to speak? Were people asking you to give keynotes, or were you just speaking at Rotary clubs and Sertoma clubs?
No, I was speaking. I was getting paid, but I wasn't speaking as a full-time speaker. So it was more of a lifestyle. I speak 6, 7 times a year. I had my other job with either the Olympic Committee or before that, even the United States Army's Morale, Wealth, and Recreation. And I would just get called up to do a few speeches here and there. But it wasn't until I got to the National Speakers Association that I saw I could actually build a business around speaking, that there was something about people resonating with my story that was releasing them in their life. And I didn't have the chops to pull that story together, to say it in such a way that people were kinetically engaged in the story for the release. In the hurdles, I knew every time when I stepped on the track, if I was prepared, pretty much within inside of 3/10 of a second how fast I was going to run that day, unless I felt really great or felt really horrible, right? I knew. So why was it when I went to my first National Speakers Association meeting in 2012, came off of an amazing speech for the NASDAQ in London, and then I get in front of the sports celebrity speaker workshop and I can't put two words together. Flatlined, totally crashed and burned in front of my peers. Uh, where was the delta between the two? Why could I in track and field know exactly what I was going to hit, and in speaking I didn't know. It was from day to day, from speech to speech, and I knew I needed to own my story. I needed to be able to tell my story in such a way that again it would release people from their pain, take action steps. And so it's more from that. Now it's even deeper. It's people tell me exactly what they're doing because of the presentation. I'm going to spend more time with my children. I'm going to take my team to lunch because we need to talk about these three issues, right? So I'm getting more of the specifics of what people are actually doing, the tangible steps, rather than, I think the first iteration, Doug, is always, oh my gosh, you're such an inspiration. That was so moving for me. I feel so sorry for you. It's so sorry for your loss. That's kind of the first iteration. The second one is um, people start coming up and telling you their life story and what information, because they've heard you become inspired. They're inspired by your story, so they feel compelled to share what's going on in their life. And then the third iteration is when people begin actually sharing the action steps that they're doing to actually make the changes happen. And so that's where I'm at right now. I'm in that third, I think I'm between two and three. I'm in between that. People are now coming up to me and saying, here's exactly how I'm going to use this information in my day-to-day business. Can you come in? Can you lead our team? Can you pull us together because you have something? So I just did a leadership retreat, for example. And so that would never have happened if I didn't go deep into my own crucible story and understand what I was going through. My, I don't know, you call it the phrase that pays. One of the things, I'm not sure if this is a phrase that pays, but this was my catalytic change. I was preparing for a TEDx speech. I didn't have it. I was going to call the curator to get out. And my buddy we're having lunch. He says, well, just tell me, how did you overcome the amputation? How did you? And I said, I didn't overcome my amputation because had I overcome my amputation, I'd have my leg back. He's like, oh, right. And that became this first thread. If I didn't overcome the amputation, then what was it that I overcame? So now I have a whole contextual model about this, the reckoning moment to the revision to the renewal and all these pieces that go in between it. And it gives a pathway, not the pathway, on how we can overcome any obstacle that's in our life. And it's resonating. But it wouldn't have started if I didn't come see you, so many years ago.
Well, one of the things that I remember, because I can still remember seeing you up on that little stage in my studio in Colorado Springs, working on that story, and we discovered the phrase "the new normal." At that time, I don't know if you'd been using it before, but I remember that was a profound revelation in that room. Everybody in the room just went, "Oh, oh, whoa, that's it, that's it," and you got really excited about the shift that I'm hearing from you is the shift from standing outside of your own experience and talking about it, just describing it as a bunch of facts. Well, I was on the, track and I started running and I went over the hurdle and then I went over the other hurdle and I hurt my leg and I just, and I got amputated. It was like fact, 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 fact. But while we're sitting here, we're going, wait, what? And so I remember, and this is the work that I've done with so many people, slowing you down and having you recreate it for me, live it for me. And I would say that shift for you and for everybody that I work with, the ability to be the story rather than talk about the experience, liberated you to go deeper with yourself in front of an audience, which allows them, the listener, to go deeper into their experience. There's a natural transference because they see themselves inside the story, even though they've never run track and field, even though they've never had an amputation. We've all lost something that changed our life. So you have now been speaking for over a decade?
Oh,
14
yeah,
years?
longer than that. I mean, I really started in like my first check that I received as a professional speaker was probably 1995. I went full time in 2012. So now, I'm sorry, I went full time in 2019. I made a commitment to begin a business in 2012 around speaking, and it took to 2019 for me to go full time.
I think that's really helpful for people to learn that it takes all of these different years of making a transition from this life into professional speaking, learning the business, not just having a speech. People think, oh, well, if I've got a really great speech, I can make a living. No, it's a business. That's what the National Speakers Association is for. However, the speech and the story is the product that you sell, and you had a product that people wanted. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I didn't even realize what the product was, and I'm still discovering it. But I'm so not comfortable is not the right word. I am so I'm so clear on what the product is. I'm very clear on what the product is, and it's even getting more crystallized for me as I go through it more and more with some other tools and resources that I now have. I don't know if you remember, but you slowed me down, and the phrase I remember is you have to show it, don't say it, right? Or say it. You have to show it.
Yeah,
You have to
show,
demonstrate.
don't tell.
Show, don't tell. Show, don't tell. And that stuck with me. Every time I'm thinking about how to do a new story now, it's always what can I show? How do I act this out in a way that invites the audience in and then releases them to whatever they might be thinking about in their own world. So that was the first thing. The second thing you said was I came back. I don't know if you remember the details. The first time I did it and showing everything, it took about 12 minutes to do. Then you said, John, a story is between 6 to 8 minutes. It needs to have a big payout at the end. And so go back and work on it. So I did. I came back. Next day I did it again. Just do it for us. And the story was 13 minutes long. And then you kind of rubbed your face and you looked at Deborah, you looked back and you said, John, the story's between 6 to 8 minutes long, gotta have a big payout in the end when the audience for that. And you said, that's a 13-minute story. And that was the first kind of glimmer of people were engaged with it. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying to do all this other stuff. You're teaching 2-character, 2-step and all this, step in, step out. And I was trying to do all these things. And now it is a product where no one's leaving during this theater act, what's in that segment of this thing. I do other stuff, but in the story, no one's going anywhere. The bathroom blockers are in, they may have drank the big Pepsi, Coke, and they're crossing their legs. One woman even told me when I told her that how I create these things, she said, "Oh my gosh, that was me. I had to go pee. I couldn't go anywhere. I had to stay in here the rest of it." So, we want to craft in such a way that people cannot go anywhere, and then allow them the space to release and mirror reflect to us what they have just heard. Give them space to do that. And that builds you have to build that into the presentation because people need to breathe. After my story, people have to breathe a little bit. And then I insert my contextual model in between that breath. And then I close the presentation out later. So I go like 3/4 of the way through the presentation, probably 7/8 through the presentation. Then I do my breathe and they work on it a little bit. And then I close it out at the end. So I've tried it at the beginning of the presentation. It's too heavy. So I got to take them down the rabbit hole a little bit and get the, I have to get them what's a good I have not earned the right to tell them that story
Correct.
that
Absolutely
early.
correct.
I have not earned the right.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
I learned the same lesson because my streaking story is my biggest, most hilarious story. And like you, I tried moving it around in my keynote. And I've also observed lots of other people with powerful stories like your Crucible story. And I've come to the realization, and this is kind of a guideline, it's not a specific rule, but you take your most powerful, either most hilarious or most deeply emotional and powerful story, and you got to stick it somewhere in that middle third. I would say if you're going to divide your speech into three pieces, your most emotional stuff has to come after you've gained their trust, after they've gotten used to you. You and I and every speaker, we have a rhythm, we have a tempo, we have a personality. We don't start out by walking up and going, "My mom just died." It's like you gotta like work with them for a while so
Yeah.
they get used to you a little bit and they go, "Oh, I kind of like this guy. He's interesting." You've got a few lessons, a few intellectual points, and you're leading them forward down the line and they're thinking, "Okay, this is interesting. There's some good lessons here." And then you go, boom. Now
Right.
you move into the story. So the craft that you're talking about is something that I hope people are listening to this and thinking, wow, this takes a lot of work. This is like a movie screenplay, but it's a one-man show. You're doing a 60-minute keynote, a 40-minute keynote, but it is constructed in such a way that you're moving the audience through intellectual, emotional, spiritual lessons, different things all over the place. You leave them at the end with a conclusion, and it takes time to develop that, and it takes a little bit of experimentation, which I'm sure you have now given hundreds and hundreds, if not over 1,000 presentations all over the world. Not only is your speech evolving, you've learned what it means to be in front of different kinds of audiences. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And the good test is one of the tests for me because it is people ask, who's your client? Who's well, my clients really are those companies that are in transition or they need to move people from one concept that they used to do to a new construct of what they're trying to do now, and getting the mindset right. So mine's really a mindset presentation on the correct framing of it. So that's my audience. So banking industries or pharmaceutical companies or um, you know uh, whatever, whoever's trying to make that shift to government technology, all those folks. But to your question is, I had an opportunity to do this in front of I'll say these two audiences. One was a group of youth who were from 7 different countries in the Netherlands. All of them had a different interpreter for presentation.
That's challenging.
That's challenging. But they were all laughing, leaning in at the speed of their interpreter. So I knew it was resonating in 7 different languages. And then I did it for
That can kind of throw you if you're not really grounded in your material.
you got to be grounded. Yeah,
You
because
got to be
it'll freak
so
you out.
grounded in your material that it
It'll,
doesn't throw you off at all because you got to change your tempo and your pace.
right. For the, until you get your, the one strategy is you tell you get all the interpreters together and you say what you're going to say so they know where you're going and
Yeah,
they kind of figure that out. But they have to also, you're not giving everything. You can only give like 4 lines at a time, maybe.
I know.
And
I
let
did
them
that
and
once.
do it and then come right. It's
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 it's it's weird.
it's weird. So and then I did it for several groups in United Arab Emirates, uh, different parts, different elements, and even for sheikhs, you know, they were asking the most questions afterwards. How does this work for this? And so that's when you know you have something that is universal that people are picking up on, and they're never hearing my story. They're hearing how my story is impacting their life. That's the transition we want them. They should never hear my story. They should be hearing how the impact for their own life.
Well, what they're actually, I believe, what is going on when we're sharing our story, because they are listening and watching and experiencing your story, but they're experiencing their story while they're experiencing your story. It's a cathartic experience. And if we do it correctly, if we know what we're doing, we are like their Sherpa guide. We are carrying them along in the story. They're following everything. They're tracking every little nuance, every little visual, every little scene, every little word and phrase and adjective and adverb. They're completely into it. But simultaneously, they're experiencing themselves and their story. And what's really important craft-wise is that you leave them with a phrase that pays. You leave them with that takeaway, because that's when they go from head to heart and experience to, oh, now I know what to do. Now I know what action to take. I had this revelation the other day, because I'm always questioning, so what it is that what do we do as storytellers? It's so transformational. It is so powerful what we do. People are changed right there in that room. They're changed. What is that? And I realized we're behavioral psychologists. We actually give them principles and ways of seeing the world and thinking about the world that's like a psychologist would reframe something for you, but then they change their behavior as a result of it. We're behavioral psychologists without having to have a degree. So we don't have to go to school to be a psychologist, because you could be an athlete, you could be a comedian, you can be a teacher, you can be a nurse, you can be a whatever, come into professional speaking. But if you embrace the privilege of the platform, if you embrace the responsibility of being a speaker, you do have the ability to help people make changes in their life that they know they need to make, they know they want to make, either they don't know how or they're afraid.
Yes.
And your courage in moving through your amputation and becoming a para-Olympian and moving through all of these things and learning how to be a professional speaker, your process allows them to see that, well, if he can do that, well, heck, I haven't lost a leg, for crying out loud. If he can do that, and then stand up there and be this inspiring person, well, of course that I can do that, and I can bring those changes into my organization. Now, let me ask you this. What is the largest audience you've spoken to?
Probably about 5,000 people.
That's a big one. That's a big
Yeah.
one.
So it was you have to do different things for the larger audience. My and just to be clear, most of my audiences are between probably 300 and 500 people.
Right. That's more
That's
typical. There's
that's
smaller
my typical.
conferences. Yeah.
Right. Maybe 1,000, right? 1,200 is maybe six times a year. But the anomaly is a 5,000. So I don't want anybody to think you're speaking to 5,000 people all the time. No, I'm speaking like 500. So, but it's a stage. It's great. It's usually have all the magnetrons and everything up there. But you can't. It's like, remember? Have you seen the movie Hoosiers?
No, I've never seen that. For some reason,
No,
I've never seen
uh,
that movie.
it's a good one. Gene Hackman. Anyway, the basketball teams, it's the David and Goliath story, right? It's the small town farm kids going against the big city kids in a basketball championship, and they walk into the big stadium. Their eyes are this big because they're going to have all these people watching them instead of the 30 people in their gym on the farm. They're going to have 3,500 people in the room, in the stadium, and so he has them measure from the free throw line to the basket. All the markings are still the same.
Right, right.
You still have to know that even on that big stage, you're still delivering the content. You're doing what got you there. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to make anything different. Maybe you got to be a little bit more larger. I think Ellen DeGeneres said she's like Ellen plus one when she's on the big stage, right?
Right, right,
She
right.
has to play the back row. So that's that's it. You're not doing anything different because you're on a larger stage. You're just doing what you did that got you there.
Well, I believe that no matter how many people are out there, all of them are listening to it in here, inside one on one. And I think the important word to keep in mind is intimacy. We have to be so, and this is one of the things that I think it takes time to evolve and grow into your own self, into the groundedness of your self-assurance, into knowing yourself so well that you can get ready to give a speech, and whether it's 500 or 50 or 5,000, you can say to yourself, I don't know who they are, but I know who I am. And I'm going to deliver this speech one-on-one to 5,000 people or 500 people. And I'm going to tell my story in the same way, because you cannot go up there and go codependent and go crazy and get all weird because it's like, oh my God, there's 5,000. I have to be 5,000 times better.
Right, right.
You can't. You
Yeah,
can only be who you are and what you do. And so how has this story, we have time here if you'd like to, and
sure. Yeah.
I'd love for you to do it, to share your new normal story in the way that you tell it to an audience.
On October 30th, 2000, I was sitting in a gate waiting area in the San Francisco International Airport. I was reading a USA Today newspaper. I was wearing shorts, which exposed my artificial leg. About 20 feet off to my left, your right, two boys about 5 years old and 7 years old were talking to their mother, their matriarch. And these two boys had made a new discovery. Mommy, look at the guy's leg. See the guy's leg over there? There goes Robot Man. So I chuckled, but I went back to reading my USA Today newspaper. Then something else happened. There began to be this outer speak conversation that should have remained inner speak conversation from everyone else in the gate waiting area who were talking about the two boys, 5 and 7, who's just discovered Robot Man. Get them out of here. Then polite to stare. Bad mom. I said, wow, that's interesting. But I went back to reading my USA Today newspaper. Then out of the corner of my eye, I see the woman. She gets up. She starts walking with the two kids over my direction. And I think she's going to do like that old song says and just walk on by. But no, she stops. She leans in and says, excuse me, sir. My children, they're absolutely fascinated by your artificial leg. It looks like you've overcome so much adversity. I mean, you're such an inspiration. Would you please tell them what happened? No one has ever come up to me in such a public setting asking me what's going on with my artificial leg, especially in front of all these naysayers that are out there. And in the space between her question and my response, I began to think about it. How would I answer these two boys and this woman? I mean, why do they think I've overcome so much adversity? Maybe I'm congenital and was just born this way. Why do they think I'm such an inspiration? I can be an axe murderer. I'm not. And why was everybody else that had that outer speak conversation that should have remained inner speak conversation? Why were they leaning in? And in the space between that her question and my response, I found my answer. I did not overcome the adversity. So that's the opening scene. That's the opening sequence. And what I'm doing in that moment is I am getting the audience ready to go on a journey. And I've asked them a question. What is it that you think I've overcome? And the last thing I said, that I did not overcome the amputation of my left leg, right? I didn't overcome the adversity. Most people are thinking in their mind at this point, he's overcome the adversity. He's overcome this thing. All these things are in their head right now. But I didn't overcome that. So now they're like, oh, Michael, what is it? But I haven't named it yet. So I'm setting up the woman and her two children. She's going to be a heroine later on in the story. She's going to shift the entire mindset of everybody else. So that means that as an individual, if I'm willing to take risks, I can shift the mindset of people that are around me. She shifted my mindset later on when I come back to the story. Um, How many times did I miss doing things because I'm reading my own proverbial USA Today newspapers? I set the an anchor that's there in the space between a question and my response. In the space between my question and my response, it always brings us back to that one particular moment seated in an airport. The visual is locked in. So when I go backwards on my timeline, so I do a backwards timeline. I start on the left side of the stage and I go backwards to the right side of the stage, and I bring it back the story backwards to the left side of the stage because we read in America from in English from left to right. So in the audience's mind, they're seeing the time sequence stamped correctly, and they see me go backwards in time. All of these things are there to anchor this story. So then I get the what I say as I roll my pants leg down. So I'm showing my leg at this time. I roll my pants leg down. And I say, I did not overcome the adversity. Roll pants leg down. Stand up. Shift over on the timeline backwards. And I say, because on May 24th, 1994, I was lying in a hospital bed at the Wesley Medical Center in Wichita, Kansas. My wife, Alice, she's holding on to my left hand. My parents, Don and Dolores Register, they're on the opposite side of the bed. My son, John Jr., he's playing with a little toy train at the foot of the bed. And the pain was tremendous. So now I'm setting the scene of the hospital, right? Dr. Randy Mullins comes in. He has a white lab coat on, a stethoscope around his neck, clipboard in his hand, says, Mr. Register, you have a tough choice to make. You can either keep your leg and use a walker or a wheelchair for the rest of your life, or I can amputate your leg and you can use a prosthesis for the rest of your life. At this point in the story, people do not know which decision I have made, and I've just showed them my artificial leg because they're running the movie in their head.
That's right. That's
They're
right.
processing it. What did he do? I don't know. I'm running a movie. And then I go through this whole sequence. And when he says that, I say, now, what kind of choice is that? Lean in, go forward, almost whisper it. What kind of choice is that? Step over one more section. I said, because 7 days ago, 7 days prior to that, I was on top of the world. May 17th, 1994, I am jamming. USA Track and Field News is picking as the one to watch in the 400-meter hurdles. I'm an Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm veteran on my way to OCS, Officer Candidate School. My life is set before me. The wind's blowing hard in Hays, Kansas, and I'm having trouble with my steps. So now it's setting up. We're about to go down into the depths. We're going to go down to this thing. Um, so I'm saying I'm a right-legged hurdler, but I'm ambidextrous. I can pick a hurdle with either leg. And on this day with the wind blowing, the right leg's coming up, the left leg's coming up, the left leg's coming up, the right leg's coming up. Sometimes in hurdles, as in life, we just want things to stay the same. As I slow that down, people almost mouth with me the same because they've heard it so many times. It's a natural
And it's a
expression.
syncopation. You're using a syncopation that allows them to follow along.
Absolutely. Um, I do that in other areas of speaking too, where I will say, we can't use old systems, old thoughts, old ideas to put into a new bucket to get a different output. If we're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, it's the definition of what? And people will say insanity. And so I'll say, why are we doing it? I don't have to say the words. They'll say it back
You're an
before I
orchestra
even say it.
conductor.
Absolutely. So now I go through the injury and I say, but the wind's blowing hard in Hays, Kansas. So there's something going on with the wind, something going on with the steps. It's in the mind. I get to the first hurdle, I'm on. I get to the second hurdle, right leg leads again, I'm on. I get to the third hurdle, I feel the Kansas wind push against me, but I push back against the Kansas wind. I realize I'm going to be short. I'll have to take that hurdle with my left leg. No problem. I've done this a million times. Off the right leg, I go. I cross the hurdle with my left leg. I land and I hear my body sails and twists in the air. And I see my left shin pass in front of my face. My shoulders hit the ground, bounce to a halt. I do a quick once over my body. My shoulders okay, my waist is okay. When I saw my knee, the patella had risen 3 inches up my femur bone. My left leg was now canted across my right, with my foot touching the black surface of the track. That is what you taught me very well there. Slow it down, put it into slow motion. So when I
Wow.
do the snap,
Wow.
I go slow motion. Everything slow motion, right?
Right.
Um, and then I do a Jeannie Robertson. May she rest in peace because she was brilliant, just brilliant. I do a Jeannie Robertson and I say, let me pause the story right here and step off the track. And I move another space to my right, your left. Um, and I say, a really sharp second lieutenant named Michelle Dickens, she took 9 pictures that day. And the next picture I'm going to show you is a picture of that injury. If you're a little bit squeamish, you can turn away for about 90 seconds. If you're like first responders, firefighters I talk to, you can say, show me now, dude. And if you're undecided, you can do this.
You got a little bit of a laugh.
Little laugh, little
Release
levity
it,
in this.
release the tension, release the tension.
Absolutely. So
Powerful
we're going to
technique.
absolutely we're going to release it, let them have a little bit of humor right there because we're in a heavy story. We gotta give them little bumps to get them like, okay, we're not going to stay here. Something's going to happen. And then I showed them the picture and I walked through it the first time. I actually do it twice, but I walked through it on who's around me. And then I click advanced slide so that it's no longer up there. So I've stayed within inside the 90 seconds as a promise to the audience. I step back onto the track. Let me step back onto the track. The only thing I could think about in that moment was just get up. Just push yourself up, John. You got this. Put yourself, get yourself up there. Come on, get yourself up. And 90 minutes later, the ambulance came, put me in the back, whisked me off to Hayes Medical Center, where another doctor in a white lab coat took one look at me, took one look at that leg, and said, Mr. Register, you got a bit of a problem. I'm going to have to fix that. So he bore down that crooked leg. We're going to do this on three. One. So everybody now in the audience is phonetically engaged with this. They are jumping out of there. They're jumping to the back row when I snap my
For
leg.
those of you who are just listening to this, John just illustrated the doctor holding on to his leg and popping it. You didn't see it. I saw it, but that's what I want you to understand that he just did, the visual. That's the problem with podcasts that are audio.
There you go.
Some of it is not seen, but anyway, I got it. I got the hit because when you did that, my body kind of went, ooh.
Right.
So now we got the doctor who popped your leg.
So he does that. So now the audience they jump.
Of course.
I'm just miming this thing, right? It's like a good horror film. Like what's going to happen when the door opens and we get the thing.
We can't tell the difference between miming and the movie, and we're in the movie. That was my leg that you just hurt.
That's right.
Your leg. That was my leg.
It was my leg.
It was like, ouch.
And sometimes, when I see it and I know what I'm thinking about it, when I'm telling myself the story inside the story I'm telling,
yeah,
I got to stop laughing, because they're with me. I know they're with me.
I know.
And I'm running another story myself.
That's part of the discipline.
Absolutely. So I'll kind of stop there. Not stop. I'll go one more because I want to bring another heroine in. So I want to. You can't make yourself the hero of the story. And so I make Alice, my wife, she's the heroine of the story. So my leg is, fast forward, I go through the amputation. I tell the doctor I know it has to be amputated. And when I wake up from the surgery, I'm in more pain than my male deductive reasoning had reasoned. So I flip a phrase, right? I just wanted something to knock it out. And I showed the morphine drip button off with a pin or with I'm showing a pin right now to signify a morphine drip button on the opposite side of the bed. And say, I was too weak to roll over to press the button. So I thought I would just call out to the nurses station. I could see them outside my door. But the You should have been down my throat. Make it sound too inaudible. You can feel like. So I'm clasping my throat at the time. Anybody that's been through a surgery that's had tubes down their throat knows what that scratchiness feels like. So I'm
Yeah.
connected to them again.
Yeah.
Um, so there I lay in that bed for the next 8 hours with my dangerous thoughts. So again, we're even though they're seeing my story, they're hearing it in their own voice. Who am I now? What's my identity? Is my wife going to stick around? Is my son still going to see me as his father? Do I still have a job in the military? Can I support my family? I mean, my Olympic dreams are over. At 8 o'clock, Dr. Randy Mullins comes back in the room, sees I've done a 180-degree shift, immediately calls my wife, Alice, who's at the local hotel because they told her to go home. I was going to sleep through the night. She's at the local hotel trying to manage me, John Jr., her mother and father-in-law. And she just found out at 7 o'clock that morning, we were geographically separated. I was stationed in Germany and did not have command sponsorship to bring my family with me. So she found out at 7 o'clock that morning from the job she was working in West Memphis, Arkansas, that job had just called to fire her for being gone too long taking care of me. This saint of a woman comes running over, gets me out of the bed, takes her 45 minutes, wheeled out to an inaccessible playground where I'm forced to watch my wife and my son play on the swings. And I couldn't push myself out of that chair. It was the first time I felt devalued, dejected, disabled. I lost it, started crying uncontrollably, heaving sobs. I just couldn't catch a breath. Alice saw me struggling. She comes running over. She wraps her arms around me. She says, "What is going on, babe?" And through those sobs and heavy, heavy tears, I tried to articulate to her everything that was in my head the night before. And that's when she said the words that stopped my downward spiral. You know what, John? We're going to get through this together. It's just our new normal. It's just our new normal. And that was where the phrase that pays comes in.
Mm-hmm. And
So now
you let her be the Yoda.
she's the Yoda. She's the Yoda.
Yeah, she becomes the Yoda. So many of those techniques from all the way back in the Story Theater Retreat are still there all these years later. However, as I listen, I am hearing so much craft, so much development. The basic principles of my methodology are there, but you have evolved it and polished it and tweaked it and rewritten it and looked for what is the better word, what is the better phrase, where's the triple, where's the staging, using the staging, being able to move here and move there. And you grabbed something from Jeannie Robinson and something from me and something from so many other people that you've probably seen over the years. Because I don't know about you, but I learn, I'm like a sponge. I watch other speakers and I go, ooh, that was good. That was good.
Right.
That was an interesting technique. It's a little flourish.
Right.
All these little flourishes, these little nuances that make it come alive. So thank you so much for that, because now we got to the end, which is your wife comes in and she says, we're going to get through this together. That allays that fear of, am I going to be a good husband anymore? Can I provide for my family again? That allows me to feel that bond, that marriage bond, that love bond. But then she gives the intellectual piece of, it's just our new normal, which allows me to think, oh, I have a new normal. And you're talking about speaking to organizations in the midst of transitions of change. So
Right.
then the question is, how do you use the new normal and translate to them and their experience and their business?
Yes. Very perfect. Great tip. You must be a speaker. um,
I'm a
so
coach.
you're a coach. So now we have to bounce them up. So we've been at the depth, right? So we have this new light, this new intellect that's just been introduced. It's just our new normal. So the first bounce is John Jr. So we have to now demonstrate what's going on. We have to demonstrate the concept. And I do it very quick. So I say, as I'm kind of wiping the tears away from my eyes, I see John Jr. jump off the swing set. He hits the ground with those 5-year-old legs and comes running over. He says, Mom, Dad, you see my big jump? Mom, Dad, you see my big jump? And he jumps in between Alice and myself. And I realize in that moment, he just validated me as his father and created his new normal. So now we show the son has taken the concept and we can do something with this now. Uh, and at the end, what I'll say is that's exactly what I had to do. I had to somehow create this new normal. Step one more step over to the chair where I was sitting on before, and I sit back down and I'll say, so in the space between her question and my response, I found my answer. It did not overcome the adversity because had I overcome the adversity, I would have my leg back. And then I pause the story there. And now we reflect into the learning part of the presentation. And I've invited the audience to answer the question, what is it that you think I overcame? So I popcorn answers around, tell them to breathe first, then let's popcorn some answers. Usually fear will come up. And I'll go off on fear. Introspectively, I will say, well, let's talk about fear. Like I know somebody, 4 or 5 of you said fear. What was the fear though? Because the fear was not Alice leaving me. Let's get that clear. That is not my fear. The fear is, am I still desirable? Do I still have what it takes? Do I still belong? Belonging is where I'm trying to get them audience to go to. I have to belong. And I'll say we have 3 things that hold us back. Other people who believe for us what we can or cannot do, which is based upon what they believe they could or could not do if they were in our situation, or society norms. Society has normalized some things for us that we believe and that we want belonging to. And I'll name some examples there. And then third, I've had some of the best hurdle coaches in the world that's got me to the Olympic trials. None of those hurdle coaches ever ran a hurdle for me. That's my obstacle to run over. I can't have my mom do it, my cousin do it, my spouse do it. I'm the one that has to attack the hurdle. I have to leave the ground. And I can't make you do that. I can give you every tool that you need to do it, give you some spikes, give you the starting blocks, give you the track, but I can't make you attack the hurdle. I can't make you jump it. And when I do jump, that is a commitment that has been made. And that's into our third part of the model, the renewal, which begins with a rebirth. And I have done some work to get them to understand that new means no prior point of reference. So that's the new. When you've made a commitment, you are now in uncharted territory. You cannot use old systems, old thoughts, old ideas to put into this new bucket to get a different output. It's impossible. When I tell the doctor to take off my leg and the doctor takes my leg off, I do not get my leg back. When you are committing to a new idea on the job, when you are transitioning from the military into civilian life, from professional athlete to just a regular person just trying to do extracurricular activities, you don't get that life back again. It's gone. I may have phantom pains to it. I wish I could still do that. I wish that didn't happen, but I'm no longer there in that moment of time. Mm-hmm. Now I need to give myself space and grace to grow.
Space and grace to grow. That's a lovely phrase. I hope you use that.
I use it all the time. Space and grace to grow.
That's rhythmic. It's so beautiful. What I'm hearing is that you have reflected on your message, adapted and evolved your message, not only worked with that story, because I believe that story is your foundational story. That story is with you forever. It's in all of your speeches, but the learning points, the messages, the model that you've created around that is continually evolved and adapted as you've grown. And as all of us as speakers realize, our audience guides us forward. They give us feedback. They ask us questions. They tell us in our pre-programmed questionnaire, what is our challenge? What are we looking for? What do we need from you? And we adapt and evolve. And boy, oh boy, listening to the hundreds of choices that you have made with staging, with pacing, with language, that's a lot of work. And it doesn't sound like you're done. So here's my last question for you today. This is about storytelling that sticks for business and life. What have you learned and experienced about story that makes it stick, that makes it memorable, marketable, and monetizable, which allows the listener to be impacted deeply and make changes in their life, but also affects you in a way that it's like, I get referrals. So what makes a story stick? Technically, emotionally, physically, staging wise, what?
First, I believe it has to be your story, starting with your words, ending with your words. It's okay to come in with other people's, quotes or things, but if you have your own quotes, it's stronger, um, because it's irrefutable, because it's your experience that you've had. You don't have to borrow from someone else. The more you can become clear on who you are and distinct on who you are, the more you become distinct in the marketplace. Secondarily, the just because you have a great story does not mean it's going to resonate with an audience. Sometimes I coach, train military service personnel who've been injured, blown up in Iraq, Afghanistan. If I got 70 people like that, they all have the same story, basically. So how do you differentiate that? So my first question to them is, or my first statement back when I hear the stories is, so what? So what's your blown up in Iraq, Afghanistan? Now that might seem crass, but it's the first thing that gets them to think, what is my differentiator? What am I doing different? What's my marketing value of this? I think thirdly, we have to listen to the feedback from the audience, because we might be saying one thing to 100 people, but 100 people are getting something totally different than what we're saying. So whatever they're giving back to us, that is where the gold is, because they are telling us what's resonating with them from the story. So then we can drive and guide the story. We don't have to change the story. We just change the one. I remember you talked about, you make one point. So make the one point be the point that most people are hearing.
Right. 1 point per story each time you tell it.
Right. So I think those three things, that's when you start understanding you have a product. If no one is saying, oh my gosh, Doug, that was the best thing I ever heard, can you come speak to my organization? You're not there. How
It's
much do
got
you
to
charge for
stick.
that?
It's got to
It's got
stick.
to
It's
stick.
got to resonate. It's got to make them feel value.
Right.
That was valuable. That was worth my time. That was worth my money. And I have to tell somebody else about John Register.
That's right.
I have to, because I just can't leave this alone. I have to do something else. I love this guy. I love his message. I want other people to experience John Register. And today we have experienced you. We have learned from you. It has been so gracious to be connected with you once again after all these years. And it's really, really powerful to hear how all of that work that we did all those years ago became foundational for everything that you do with every story that you do. So thank you for your time today and for your wit and wisdom and courage to share your profoundly powerful story. Thank you for the listeners of Storytelling That Sticks for Business and Life. And carry on your journey, John. Carry on.
Thank you, Doug. Keep on. You're doing fantastic work.
All right, well, that's it for this episode. If you feel that you learned something valuable today, something that you can use that will make your story stick, stories that make you and your business memorable, marketable, and monetizable, there are 3 things I'd like you to do. First, click on the follow or subscribe button and leave a review wherever you listen. And second, share this podcast with your friends and coworkers, your email list, and on social media. And third, connect with me on LinkedIn. And when you're ready to get serious about taking your stories to the next level, or if you have an important speech, presentation, or TED Talk coming up, or if you want some guidance on how to make the transition to becoming a professional speaker, let's schedule your free 30-minute coaching session where we can get to know each other and see if we're a good fit. And as always, I'd love to hear from you with your questions and comments. Let me know that you're out there listening and learning. You can send an email with your questions, comments, and suggestions to Deborah@DougStevenson.com. That's Deborah, Deborah, @DougStevenson.com. Hey, thanks for listening. Until the next episode, I'm Doug Stevenson.